Dr. Elena Vasquez stepped off the transport shuttle onto the crystalline platform of Nexus Station, her breath catching as she gazed upon the Galactic Academy for the first time. The massive structure stretched across 3 moons, its bioluminescent towers pulsing with energy that could be seen from several star systems away. Students from hundreds of species moved through the corridors like a living rainbow of scales, fur, tentacles, and forms she couldn't even begin to categorize. Elena clutched her acceptance letter tighter, the holographic seal of the Academy Council shimmering in the artificial light. After years of hiding her true nature, she was finally here. The admission process had been grueling, requiring her to demonstrate mastery of 17 different scientific disciplines, solve theoretical problems that had stumped galactic minds for centuries, and undergo psychological evaluations that would have broken lesser beings. What they didn't know was that Elena wasn't just another promising student from the Outer Rim territories. She was human. The Galactic Council had banned humanity from the Academy 200 years ago, after the infamous Terra incident. Humans were classified as a dangerous species, too unpredictable and violent to be trusted with advanced galactic knowledge. The official record stated that humans had been quarantined to their home system for the safety of all civilized worlds. Elena had spent 3 years creating her false identity as a member of the Zalari, a rarely seen species from the galaxy's edge. The Zalari were known for their exceptional intelligence and reclusive nature, making them perfect cover. With careful genetic modifications, synthetic skin grafts, and neural implants that altered her brain patterns, she had become Zara Veltar, a young Zalari prodigy seeking to advance galactic science. As she made her way through the registration hall, Elena marveled at the casual display of technologies that would revolutionize human civilization. Students manipulated matter with thought-controlled devices, communicated through quantum entanglement networks, and casually discussed theories that challenged the fundamental laws of physics as humans understood them. A tall, crystalline being approached her with movements that reminded her of flowing water. "Welcome, Zara Veltar," it said, its voice resonating through the air like wind chimes. "I am Professor Kethmore, your assigned orientation guide. The Academy is pleased to welcome such a distinguished applicant to our halls." Elena bowed in the traditional Zalari manner, grateful for the months she had spent studying their customs. "The honor is mine, Professor. I look forward to contributing to the Academy's mission of advancing galactic knowledge." Professor Kethmore led her through corridors, lined with murals depicting the great achievements of galactic civilization. There were the Arcturus Collective's mastery of temporal mechanics, the Vegan Empire's breakthrough in consciousness transfer, and the Syrian Federation's development of planet-scale terraforming technologies. Notably absent was any mention of humanity's contributions to galactic science before their exile. "Your application was most impressive," Kethmore continued as they walked. "The Council was particularly intrigued by your theoretical work on quantum consciousness bridging. Such concepts are typically beyond the scope of most first-year students." Elena smiled carefully. The quantum consciousness bridging theory was actually based on research her grandmother had conducted before the Terra incident. Dr. Maria Vasquez had been one of Earth's most brilliant scientists, and her hidden journals had become Elena's secret advantage. Humanity might have been banned from the Academy, but their scientific legacy lived on in her mind. They arrived at the dormitory complex, a series of interconnected habitat pods designed to accommodate the diverse environmental needs of hundreds of species. Elena's assigned quarters were in the low-gravity section, appropriate for a Zalari physiology. The room was modest but comfortable, with a learning terminal connected to the Academy's vast database and a small lab set up for independent research. "Classes begin tomorrow," Kethmore explained. "Your schedule has been transmitted to your personal device. I must warn you, the Academy's curriculum is challenging even for the most gifted students. Many promising candidates have found themselves overwhelmed by the pace and complexity of advanced galactic science." After Kethmore left, Elena sat on her bed and allowed herself a moment of quiet celebration. She had made it past the first hurdle. She was inside the most prestigious institution of learning in the galaxy, surrounded by knowledge that could transform humanity's understanding of the universe. But her celebration was short-lived. As she reviewed her course schedule, a chill ran down her spine. One of her required classes was Galactic History and Threat Assessment, taught by Professor Vex High, the galaxy's leading expert on dangerous species. According to the course description, they would be studying the rise and containment of various threats to galactic peace, with particular focus on the human menace and the events that led to their quarantine. Elena realized that not only would she be studying her own species from the perspective of their enemies, but she would be doing so under the direct instruction of the being most responsible for maintaining humanity's exile. Professor Vexhai had been one of the primary architects of the containment protocols that kept Earth isolated from the rest of the galaxy. As night fell over Nexus Station, Elena stared out her window at the stars, knowing that somewhere among them was Earth, her true home. Her people were trapped in a single solar system, unaware that one of their own had infiltrated the highest levels of galactic education. The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders like a physical burden. She had come here with multiple purposes. Yes, she wanted to learn the advanced sciences that could help humanity break free from their isolation. But she also needed to understand why the galaxy feared her species so much, and whether there was any path to redemption for humanity in the eyes of the Galactic Council. Tomorrow, her real education would begin. She would sit in classrooms filled with species that viewed humans as barely controlled monsters, learning from professors who had dedicated their lives to keeping her people contained. Every day would be a test of her disguise, her resolve, and her ability to hide the very humanity that made her who she was. Elena closed her eyes and whispered a promise to the stars. She would succeed not just for herself, but for every human dreaming of a future among the stars. The galaxy would learn that humanity deserved a place at the cosmic table, even if she had to prove it one careful step at a time. Elena's first morning at the academy began with advanced quantum mechanics, taught by Professor Xylith, a being that resembled a floating mass of interconnected neural networks suspended in a translucent shell. The classroom itself defied human understanding of architecture, with surfaces that shifted and curved according to the mathematical concepts being discussed. As Zara Veltar, Elena took a seat among 30 other students representing 12 different species. Her synthetic skin felt uncomfortably tight as she activated her note-taking device, hyper-aware that any mistake could expose her true identity. The neural implants that disguised her brain patterns hummed quietly, a constant reminder of how precarious her position truly was. Today we explore the fundamental nature of reality itself, Professor Xylith announced, its voice emanating from somewhere within its neural mass. The helix equations that govern quantum state manipulation across dimensional barriers. For most species, these concepts represent the absolute limits of comprehension. Elena found herself genuinely struggling to follow the lecture. The mathematics involved were unlike anything developed on Earth, incorporating dimensional variables that human science hadn't even theorized. She watched in amazement as her classmates manipulated holographic equations with their minds, reshaping reality models as easily as children playing with toys. A student 2 seats away, a reptilian being with 4 arms and scales that shifted color with its emotions, raised one of its hands. Professor, if these equations are universal constants, why do the restricted databases contain references to species that appeared to violate them? Professor Xylith's neural networks flickered with what Elena interpreted as surprise. An astute observation, Crixenal. You refer to the classified archives regarding primitive species that demonstrated anomalous capabilities before their proper containment. Elena's heart rate increased, though she was careful to keep her expression neutral. Were they talking about humanity? The most notable case involves a species from the Terra system, the professor continued. Before their quarantine, they exhibited inexplicable abilities to adapt and innovate beyond their theoretical limitations. This phenomenon was termed impossible science by the Galactic Council. Crixnell's scales shifted to a curious orange pattern. What made their science impossible? They achieved breakthroughs through methods that violated established learning protocols, Xylith explained. Where civilized species progress through systematic knowledge transfer and careful theoretical development, this particular species demonstrated chaotic innovation patterns. They would leap from primitive concepts to advanced applications without proper foundational understanding. Elena bit her tongue to prevent herself from defending humanity's scientific methods. What the galaxy called chaotic innovation was simply human creativity and intuition at work. Her people didn't always follow linear paths to discovery, because they weren't bound by the rigid thinking patterns that seemed to characterize galactic civilization. Furthermore, the professor continued, They exhibited dangerous unpredictability in their applications of knowledge. The Terra incident demonstrated the catastrophic results when such a species gains access to advanced galactic science without proper ethical conditioning. The class murmured among themselves, and Elena caught fragments of conversations expressing fear and disgust regarding humanity. She forced herself to listen, learning how the galaxy truly viewed her species. After class, Elena hurried to her next lecture, Galactic History and Threat Assessment. The classroom was arranged like an amphitheater, with Professor HFY standing at the center. The professor was the imposing figure, standing nearly 3 meters tall with skin like polished obsidian and 6 arms that moved with predatory grace. This was the being who had personally overseen humanity's quarantine. "Welcome to Threat Assessment," HFY began, its voice carrying undertones that made Elena's bones vibrate. "Today we examine the greatest mistake in galactic history. The premature contact with species designation Terra 3, commonly known as humans." A holographic display materialized above the professor, showing Earth from space. Elena's throat tightened as she saw her homeworld rendered as a case study in galactic failure. 2 centuries ago, the Galactic Council made contact with this species despite obvious warning signs. HFY continued. Their development patterns were highly irregular. They had achieved spaceflight and nuclear technology simultaneously, something that should have been impossible, given their limited time frame of technological development. The hologram shifted to show early human space missions alongside images of nuclear weapons. Elena realized the galaxy had been watching humanity far longer than anyone on Earth suspected. The Council, in its naive optimism, decided to extend a limited invitation for cultural and scientific exchange. 3 human representatives were brought to the Academy as part of an experimental integration program. Elena leaned forward despite herself. This was history that had been completely erased from Earth's records. The experiment was a disaster, HFY declared. Within 6 months, the human subjects had absorbed and synthesized knowledge that should have taken decades to properly assimilate. They began proposing modifications to fundamental galactic technologies, suggesting improvements that our finest minds had never considered. A student in the front row, a being that looked like a walking coral reef, spoke up. "Surely such rapid advancement would be beneficial for galactic progress." HFY's 6 arms gestured dismissively. Their innovations were reckless and dangerous. They proposed using quantum tunneling for instantaneous matter transmission, suggested weaponizing temporal mechanics for defensive purposes, and developed theoretical frameworks for consciousness manipulation that violated every ethical protocol established by civilized species. Elena felt a surge of pride mixed with frustration. Her people's ability to think outside established parameters was being portrayed as a fundamental flaw rather than a strength. The final straw came when they attempted to recreate the Academy's central power core using modified human technology, HFY continued. Their experiment created a spatial rift that nearly destroyed an entire moon. The Council was forced to act immediately to prevent further catastrophe. The hologram showed what Elena assumed was the Terra incident, a massive explosion of energy that seemed to tear space itself apart before being contained by some kind of galactic emergency response. The humans were returned to their system and a quarantine barrier was established, the professor concluded. They remain contained to this day, prevented from spreading their chaotic influence throughout civilized space. As the class ended, Elena found herself shaking with a mixture of anger and determination. The galactic perspective painted humanity as dangerous children playing with forces beyond their comprehension. But Elena knew the truth was more complex. Human innovation wasn't chaotic. It was intuitive and adaptive in ways that rigid galactic thinking couldn't accommodate. Walking back to her dormitory, Elena encountered Crixinol from her quantum mechanics class. The reptilian being's scales were shifting through a friendly blue pattern. "Zara, isn't it?" Crixinol said. "I found today's lectures fascinating. Your people, the Zalari, are known for unconventional thinking patterns as well. Do you ever worry about being perceived as too similar to dangerous species like the humans?" Elena's enhanced vocal cords produced the proper Zalari harmonic response. "The Zalari value wisdom over innovation. We seek understanding, not disruption." "A wise approach," Crixinol agreed. "I've always wondered what became of those human subjects after their return to Terra. The official records say they were successfully reintegrated, but there are rumors of continued monitoring. Elena's blood ran cold. What kind of monitoring? Deep space sensors around their system, automated containment protocols, that sort of thing. Some say the Council maintains active surveillance to ensure they never develop the capability to breach the quarantine on their own. As Elena reached her quarters, she realized her mission had become far more complex than she had imagined. Not only was humanity actively contained and monitored, but the galaxy's fear of her species ran deeper than simple xenophobia. They genuinely believed humans represented an existential threat to galactic stability. She needed to prove them wrong. But first, she had to understand exactly what had happened during the Terra incident and why the galaxy remained so terrified of human potential. The answers she sought were somewhere within the Academy's vast archives, but accessing them would require her to dig deeper into her false identity, while avoiding the suspicion of professors who had dedicated their lives to keeping her people imprisoned among the stars. 3 weeks into her studies, Elena had established herself as a promising but unremarkable student. She deliberately kept her performance slightly below her true capabilities, knowing that standing out too much could invite unwanted attention. However, her careful mediocrity was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain as she encountered scientific concepts that sparked her inherently human curiosity. During her applied dimensional physics class, Professor Mordek presented a problem that had stumped researchers for 50 years: how to create stable wormhole matrices for instantaneous galactic communication. As Elena listened to the conventional approaches being discussed, her mind automatically began exploring alternative solutions based on human theoretical frameworks her grandmother had developed. The primary challenge, Professor Mordek explained, his crystalline form refracting light as he gestured, lies in maintaining quantum coherence across vast distances without the matrix collapsing into paradox states. Elena found herself raising her hand before she could stop herself. Professor, has anyone considered using recursive probability loops to anchor the coherence points? The classroom fell silent. Several students turned to stare at her, and Elena realized she had made a mistake. The concept she had just suggested was pure human theoretical physics, something that wouldn't exist in any galactic database. Professor Mordek's crystal facets shifted to focus on her. Miss Veltar, could you elaborate on this recursive probability loop concept? Elena's mind raced. She needed to find a way to explain the theory without revealing its human origins. It's a theoretical framework I've been developing in my personal research. The idea is to create probability anchors that reference their own quantum states, creating a stable loop that resists collapse. Fascinating, the professor mused. I'm not familiar with this approach. Could you demonstrate the mathematical framework? Elena realized she was trapped. She either had to admit she couldn't prove her theory, which would damage her academic standing, or demonstrate mathematics that could expose her human thinking patterns. She chose a middle path. I'd prefer to develop the full proof before presenting it publicly, she said. May I submit it as part of my independent research project? Professor Mordek agreed, but Elena noticed the intense curiosity in his crystalline features. She had bought herself time, but she had also painted herself into a corner that could lead to discovery. After class, Elena knew she needed to find information about the original human subjects who had attended the academy. If she could understand how they had been exposed, she might be able to avoid their mistakes. This meant accessing the classified archives, something that would require careful planning and considerable risk. The Academy's central library was a marvel of galactic engineering, with information storage systems that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Elena had discovered that different clearance levels provided access to different dimensional layers of data. Her student credentials allowed her to access the first 3 layers, but the information about the Terra incident was buried much deeper. Elena began her infiltration attempt by establishing a pattern of legitimate research behavior. Every day for a week, she visited the library to work on genuine academic projects, always following the same routine. She noticed that the security systems tracked user patterns, and unusual behavior triggered additional scrutiny. On her 8th visit, Elena implemented her plan. She had discovered that the library's quantum security grid had a brief recalibration cycle every 27 hours and 14 minutes. During this 90-second window, the deeper archive layers became temporarily accessible to anyone already logged into the system. Elena positioned herself at a research terminal precisely 15 minutes before the recalibration cycle. She began a legitimate query about dimensional mathematics, establishing her presence in the system. As the security grid began its recalibration, she quickly executed a search protocol she had spent days programming. The deeper archives opened like blooming flowers, revealing layer after layer of classified information. Elena navigated quickly through data streams about galactic threats, species containment protocols, and finally found what she was looking for: the complete records of the Terra incident. What she discovered made her blood run cold. The 3 human subjects brought to the Academy hadn't been selected randomly. They were Dr. Sarah Chen, a theoretical physicist, Dr. Marcus Webb, a quantum engineer, and Dr. Elena Vasquez Sr., her own grandmother. Elena's hands trembled as she read her grandmother's Academy records. Maria Vasquez had been brilliant even by galactic standards, quickly mastering concepts that should have taken years to understand. But more importantly, she had begun questioning fundamental assumptions about galactic science that no one had thought to challenge for millennia. The records showed that her grandmother had identified critical flaws in the Academy's energy distribution systems, proposed revolutionary improvements to their consciousness transfer technologies, and developed theoretical frameworks for what she called adaptive quantum consciousness, the ability for minds to evolve and expand beyond their original biological limitations. But the file that made Elena's heart stop was labeled Project Prometheus. Her grandmother and the other human subjects hadn't just been students. They had been unknowingly participating in a secret experiment designed to test whether humanity could be safely integrated into galactic civilization. The test had multiple phases, each designed to push the humans to their limits. The Galactic Council wanted to understand the extent of human adaptability and innovation before making any decisions about broader contact. What they discovered terrified them. According to the classified reports, the humans didn't just learn galactic science, they improved it. Within months, they had identified fundamental errors in theories that had been accepted for thousands of years. They proposed technological applications that galactic scientists considered impossible, and they demonstrated an uncanny ability to find solutions that bypassed established limitations entirely. The final entry in the file detailed the disaster that ended the experiment. Dr. Marcus Webb had attempted to improve the Academy's primary power core by introducing what he called cascade amplification, a method of increasing energy output by creating controlled feedback loops within the quantum matrix. The galactic scientists had tried to stop him, insisting that his calculations were flawed and dangerous. But Webb had been convinced that his approach would revolutionize galactic energy production. Against direct orders, he implemented his modifications during a routine maintenance cycle. The resulting explosion hadn't just nearly destroyed a moon, it had torn a hole in space-time itself. The emergency containment protocols had required the combined effort of 12 galactic fleets and had taken 3 days to stabilize. The energy readings suggested that Webb's modifications would have worked exactly as he predicted, but the scale of improvement was so massive that the existing infrastructure couldn't handle it. Elena realized with growing horror that her grandmother and the others hadn't failed because their science was wrong. They had failed because their science was too advanced for the galaxy to safely implement. Human innovation didn't just challenge galactic thinking, it fundamentally threatened the stability of galactic civilization. The security grid finished its recalibration, cutting off Elena's access to the deeper archives. She sat in stunned silence, processing what she had learned. The quarantine wasn't just about containing a dangerous species. It was about protecting the galaxy from innovations that could reshape the fundamental nature of reality itself. As Elena made her way back to her dormitory, she realized that every assumption she had made about her mission was wrong. She hadn't come to the Academy to prove that humanity deserved acceptance. She had come to infiltrate an institution specifically designed to prevent humans from sharing their true capabilities with the galaxy. But the most disturbing revelation was yet to come. As she reviewed the files in her memory, Elena noticed something that made her question everything. The mathematical frameworks her grandmother had developed, the theoretical breakthroughs that had so terrified the Galactic Council, Elena recognized them. They were the same theories she had been unconsciously developing in her own research. The same solutions that had seemed so obvious to her were the exact innovations that had branded humanity as an existential threat to galactic stability. Elena realized that she wasn't just carrying on her grandmother's legacy. She was proving that the Galactic Council's fears about human potential were completely justified. Every day she spent at the Academy, she was becoming a more dangerous threat to the established order of the universe itself. Elena's discovery in the archives changed everything. For days, she struggled with the weight of knowing that her very presence at the Academy represented the exact threat the Galactic Council had worked for 2 centuries to contain. Every solution she instinctively developed, every innovation that seemed obvious to her human mind, was potentially catastrophic to the established galactic order. But her crisis of confidence was interrupted when Professor HFY announced a special project that would determine the final grades for his threat assessment class. You will work in pairs to analyze a hypothetical first contact scenario, the professor explained. His 6 arms moving in patterns that Elena had learned indicated serious concentration. Each team will be given classified data about a newly discovered species and must develop a comprehensive assessment of their integration potential. Elena's heart sank when she was paired with Crixnall. The reptilian student had been consistently friendly, but his scales had been shifting to suspicious amber patterns whenever he looked at her lately. She worried that her slight behavioral inconsistencies were starting to accumulate into a recognizable pattern. Our assigned species is quite interesting, Crixnall said as they settled into a private study alcove. His scales were cycling through analytical blue patterns. They're called the Vorthon, and they've achieved spaceflight despite some unusual developmental characteristics. Elena reviewed the data packet with growing unease. The Vorthon exhibited many of the same traits that had marked humanity as dangerous: rapid technological development, unconventional problem-solving approaches, and a tendency to innovate beyond their apparent limitations. They seem to have developed faster than light travel using principles we don't recognize, Elena observed, studying the technical readouts. Their energy signatures suggest they're manipulating space-time in ways that our physics models say should be impossible. Crixnall's scales shifted to worried orange. Exactly like the humans did before their containment, the pattern recognition algorithms flagged them as a high-risk species requiring immediate quarantine protocols. Elena found herself in an impossible position. The academic exercise was forcing her to either condemn a species that reminded her of humanity or defend innovative thinking in a way that might expose her own nature. She chose a careful middle path. Perhaps we should analyze their specific achievements before making containment recommendations, she suggested. Understanding their methods might help us predict their future development patterns. As they dove deeper into the Vorthon data, Elena began to notice something troubling. The species' technological signatures weren't just similar to human development patterns. They were identical in several key areas. The mathematical frameworks, the energy manipulation techniques, even the apparent violations of established physics, all matched theories she had seen in her grandmother's hidden research. Crixnall, she said carefully, do you notice anything unusual about their faster-than-light methodology? His scales flickered through several colors before settling on confused purple. Now that you mention it, some of these equations look familiar. But that's impossible. This is a newly discovered species with no previous galactic contact. Elena's blood turned to ice as understanding dawned. The Vorthon weren't a real species. This was a test, and the data they were analyzing was based on actual human technological capabilities. Professor HFY was using her grandmother's confiscated research as the foundation for a hypothetical species evaluation, but the test ran deeper than simple academic assessment. As Elena continued reviewing the files, she realized that the Vorthon discoveries included technologies that humanity had never actually developed, innovations that existed only in theoretical form in her grandmother's most advanced papers. Someone had taken human theoretical frameworks and extrapolated them to their logical conclusions. The energy readings from their latest experiments are concerning, Crixnall continued, oblivious to Elena's growing panic. If these calculations are accurate, they're approaching the kind of power manipulation that could destabilize entire star systems. Elena forced herself to focus on the data, while her mind raced through the implications. The Academy wasn't just studying past human achievements, they were modeling future human potential. This exercise was designed to prepare students for the theoretical possibility that humanity might eventually break free from their quarantine and achieve even more dangerous levels of technological advancement. "We need to recommend immediate containment," Crixnall said firmly. "A species with this development pattern represents an existential threat to galactic stability." Elena stared at the conclusions they were expected to reach. By completing this assignment, she would be formally recommending the permanent containment of her own species based on their potential for innovation, but refusing to participate or arguing against containment would immediately expose her human sympathies. "What if we approach this differently?" Elena suggested, her voice carefully controlled. "Instead of focusing on containment, what if we explored integration protocols that could harness their innovative capabilities while maintaining safety controls?" Crixnall's scales shifted to shocked yellow. "You want to argue for integration of a species that exhibits clear human-level threat indicators?" The room suddenly felt very quiet. Elena realized that her suggestion had crossed a line that no galactic citizen would consider crossing. The idea of integrating rather than containing a potentially dangerous species was apparently unthinkable to galactic minds. "I'm simply exploring all possibilities," she said quickly. "Academic thoroughness requires considering multiple approaches. But the historical precedent is clear," Crixnall insisted. "The human experiment proved that some species cannot be safely integrated, regardless of their potential contributions. The risk of catastrophic innovation always outweighs the potential benefits." Elena found herself arguing for humanity's redemption without being able to reveal her true motivations. But what if the humans' mistakes could inform better integration protocols? What if we could develop safeguards that would allow innovative species to contribute to galactic progress without threatening stability? Crixnall stared at her for a long moment, his scales cycling through patterns she couldn't interpret. "Zara, your suggestions are unusual. Most Zalari I've encountered are far more conservative in their approach to galactic security." Elena's enhanced vocal cords produced harmonics indicating deep thought, a standard Zalari response to intellectual challenges. "Perhaps my isolation on the galactic rim has given me a different perspective on risk assessment." But even as she spoke, Elena could see that Crixnall's suspicions were crystallizing into something more dangerous. His scales had settled into a steady amber pattern that she had learned indicated focused analysis and potential threat assessment. "I think we should schedule a meeting with Professor Vexhai," Crixnall said slowly. "Your perspectives on this assignment are significant enough to warrant faculty review." Elena's world tilted. A faculty review would subject her to intense scrutiny that her disguise might not survive. Worse, she was beginning to suspect that this entire scenario had been designed specifically to test her reactions to human-related scenarios. As they packed up their research materials, Elena caught Crixnall discreetly activating a communication device. She couldn't hear the message he transmitted, but she could guess its content. Her carefully maintained cover was beginning to unravel, and she was running out of time to complete her mission. That night, alone in her quarters, Elena stared out at the stars and faced a terrible choice. She could maintain her disguise by condemning humanity and completing the assignment as expected, or she could reveal her true nature in a desperate attempt to argue for her species' redemption. But there was a third option, one that her grandmother's research had made possible. Elena could prove that human innovation wasn't a threat to galactic stability, by demonstrating that it could actually save the galaxy from a danger that none of them had yet recognized. The files she had studied contained more than just historical records and theoretical frameworks. They also contained early warning data about approaching cosmic phenomena that the Galactic Council didn't fully understand, and Elena's human perspective had allowed her to recognize patterns that galactic scientists had completely missed. The galaxy was about to face a crisis that would require exactly the kind of innovative thinking that they had spent 2 centuries trying to contain. Elena's true test wouldn't be whether she could maintain her disguise, but whether she could convince the galaxy to embrace humanity's help before it was too late. Elena's meeting with Professor Vexhai was scheduled for the following afternoon, giving her one night to prepare for what could be either her exposure or her opportunity to save the galaxy. She spent hours reviewing the cosmic data she had discovered in the archives, confirming her terrible suspicions about what was approaching the galactic core. The conference room where they met was austere and intimidating, with walls that seemed to absorb light and sound. Professor Vexhai sat across from her, his obsidian skin reflecting the dim lighting like polished stone. Crixnell positioned himself slightly behind Elena, his scales maintaining that steady amber pattern of focused observation. "Miss Veltar," Professor Vexhai began, his voice carrying undertones that made Elena's bones vibrate. "Your partner has expressed concerns about your approach to our threat assessment exercise. He feels your perspectives on species integration are unconventional for a Zalari." Elena kept her breathing steady, knowing that any sign of stress could trigger additional scrutiny. "I believe academic inquiry benefits from exploring multiple perspectives, Professor, even uncomfortable ones." "Indeed," Vexhai mused, leaning forward slightly. "Tell me, what specifically makes you believe that highly innovative species could be safely integrated into galactic civilization?" This was the moment Elena had been preparing for. She could continue her deception and condemn humanity, or she could reveal the truth about the approaching danger and hope that the galaxy's survival instincts would overcome their prejudices. "Because the galaxy is going to need innovative thinking to survive what's coming," she said quietly. The room fell silent. Crixnell's scales shifted to confused purple, while Professor Vexhai's 6 arms moved into postures Elena recognized as heightened attention. "Explain yourself," Vexhai commanded. Elena activated her personal data pad and projected the cosmic readings she had compiled. "I've been analyzing long-range sensor data from the Galactic Core archives. There's a pattern of increasing gravitational anomalies and quantum field distortions that matches theoretical models for a specific type of cosmic catastrophe." The holographic display showed a timeline of readings spanning the past 50 years, with steadily increasing instability markers approaching the galactic core region. "The pattern indicates an approaching cascade collapse of the central black hole's quantum stabilization field," Elena continued. "Within 18 months, the gravitational anchor that holds our galaxy together will destabilize, potentially triggering a chain reaction that could tear apart every star system within 1,000 light-years of the core." Professor Vexhai studied the data with obvious expertise. His arms moving in patterns that Elena had learned indicated deep analytical thought. "These readings are concerning, but they fall within acceptable variance ranges for galactic core fluctuations." "Only if you're using conventional interpretation models," Elena countered. "But if you apply recursive probability analysis to the quantum field distortions, a different pattern emerges." Elena activated a second projection, showing the same data processed through mathematical frameworks her grandmother had developed. The results were terrifying, clear indicators of imminent catastrophic collapse that conventional galactic science had completely missed. "This methodology," Vexhai said slowly, "I'm not familiar with these analytical frameworks." Elena took a deep breath. This was the point of no return. They're based on theoretical models developed by human scientists before the quarantine. Models that the Galactic Council confiscated and classified after the Terra incident. Crixnell's scales exploded into shocked yellow patterns. "You have access to classified human research?" "Because I am human," Elena said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of her revelation. The room erupted into chaos. Crixnell scrambled backward, his scales flashing through emergency warning patterns. Professor Vexhai's 6 arms moved with lightning speed, activating security protocols that sealed the room and initiated containment fields around Elena's position. "Impossible," Vexhai snarled, his voice carrying harmonics of genuine fear. "The quarantine protocols ensure that no human can leave their system. Our sensors would detect any breach." Elena remained seated, knowing that any sudden movement would trigger automated defense systems. "Your sensors are designed to detect human technology and biological signatures. They weren't designed to detect a human who had undergone complete genetic modification and neural restructuring to mimic another species." "The Zalari identity," Crixnell whispered, his scales now cycling through patterns of betrayal and terror, "is completely artificial," Elena confirmed. "I spent 3 years preparing for this infiltration. My name is Dr. Elena Vasquez and Dr. Maria Vasquez. One of the original human subjects was my grandmother." Professor Vexhai's obsidian features showed no emotion, but Elena could see the rapid calculations happening behind his eyes. "You're claiming to be the descendant of Subject 3 from the Terra incident, the genetic lineage that demonstrated the highest innovation coefficients and the highest threat potential," Elena added. Yes, I know what the classified files say about my grandmother's work. I know about Project Prometheus, about the Cascade amplification disaster, and about the real reasons humanity was quarantined. Then you understand why you represent an existential threat to galactic stability, HFY said coldly. Even isolated and contained, your species continues to develop along dangerous trajectories. Elena gestured to the holographic data still floating between them. And that's exactly why the galaxy needs us now. Your conventional science can't recognize what's happening to the galactic core, because it follows predictable, systematic analysis patterns. Human intuitive thinking sees connections that linear galactic logic misses. You're asking us to trust the very cognitive patterns that nearly destroyed an Academy moon, HFY countered. I'm asking you to look at the data, Elena insisted. Run the calculations yourself. Apply the theoretical frameworks I've provided to your core sensor readings. The math doesn't lie regardless of its origin. For several tense minutes, Professor HFY worked with the data projections, his movements becoming increasingly agitated as the implications became clear. Elena watched his expression shift from skepticism to concern to outright alarm. The cascade progression models are disturbingly consistent, he admitted finally. If these calculations are accurate, we have perhaps 16 months before the initial collapse triggers begin. 14 months, Elena corrected. I've been refining the timeline based on recent acceleration patterns. The quantum field distortions are increasing faster than the initial models predicted. Krixnall, who'd been silent throughout the data analysis, finally spoke. Even if this threat is real, how do we know this isn't some elaborate human deception? A way to justify breaking the quarantine by creating an artificial crisis. Elena had anticipated this objection. Because the data comes from your own sensors, not human sources. I'm simply interpreting information that's been sitting in your archives for decades. The threat exists whether humans are involved or not. But you're claiming that only human analysis methods can address this crisis, HFY observed. I'm claiming that conventional galactic science has systematic blind spots that prevent it from recognizing certain types of patterns, Elena clarified. My grandmother identified similar limitations 200 years ago. The galaxy's emphasis on systematic, predictable progress creates cognitive frameworks that miss chaotic or recursive phenomena. Elena activated another data stream, showing comparative analysis results. Look at how different mathematical approaches yield different conclusions from the same sensor data. Galactic methodologies produce results that fall within expected parameters and therefore don't trigger alarm responses. Human analytical frameworks reveal the underlying instability patterns that galactic science systematically filters out. You're suggesting that our entire scientific methodology is fundamentally flawed, HFY said, his voice carrying dangerous undertones. I'm suggesting that it's incomplete, Elena replied carefully. Galactic science excels at systematic analysis and predictable development patterns, but it struggles with chaotic systems, emergent phenomena, and scenarios that require intuitive leaps beyond established frameworks. Professor HFY stood and began pacing, his 6 arms moving in patterns Elena had never seen before. The stress indicators were clear, but she couldn't tell whether he was preparing to eliminate her as a threat or beginning to consider her warning seriously. The Academy's Central Council must be informed immediately, he said finally. If these calculations are accurate, every moment of delay increases the risk of catastrophic failure. And if they're not accurate? Krixnall asked. Then we will have learned that human infiltration capabilities are far more advanced than our security protocols anticipated, HFY replied grimly. Either scenario requires immediate escalation to the highest levels of galactic authority. As security protocols began transmitting Elena's location and status to Academy leadership, she realized that her carefully planned mission had transformed into something far more significant. She was no longer just trying to prove humanity's worth to the galaxy. Within hours of Elena's revelation, the Academy had transformed into a fortress. Emergency protocols sealed every section, and Elena found herself in a maximum security containment cell designed for the most dangerous entities in galactic space. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was being held in a facility originally designed to contain another human, should one ever breach the quarantine. But Elena wasn't alone in her confinement. Through the quantum communication array, she was connected to an emergency session of the Galactic Council itself. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the virtual chamber, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of concern, fear, and outrage. Chancellor Morthak, the ancient crystalline being who had led the council for over a millennium, dominated the central platform. His voice resonated through dimensions Elena couldn't perceive, carrying authority accumulated over countless eons. "We face an unprecedented crisis," the Chancellor announced. "A human infiltrator has not only breached our most secure institution, but has presented evidence of a galactic-scale catastrophe that our finest scientists failed to detect." Elena watched as the sensor data and her analysis were presented to the assembled representatives. She could see the shock ripple through the chamber, as beings who had never questioned galactic scientific supremacy were forced to confront the possibility that their methodologies had critical limitations. "The mathematical frameworks used to reach these conclusions," Chancellor Morthak continued, "are based on human theoretical models that we classified as too dangerous for general knowledge. Yet these same dangerous models may be the only tools capable of saving our galaxy." A representative from the Vegan Empire, a being of pure energy contained within a geometric field matrix, spoke first. "How do we know this isn't an elaborate deception? Humans have demonstrated unprecedented capabilities for manipulation and innovation. This could be an attempt to justify breaking their quarantine by creating an artificial crisis." Elena was given permission to respond directly to the council. "Because you can verify everything independently," she said, her voice carrying across the quantum channels. "I'm not asking you to trust human claims or human data. I'm asking you to apply human analysis methods to your own sensor readings." She activated the holographic displays that had convinced Professor Vexhai. "Every piece of source data comes from galactic monitoring stations. Every measurement was taken by your own equipment. The only thing that's human is the mathematical framework used to interpret what you've already observed." A representative from the Arcturus Collective, whose species had mastered temporal mechanics, raised a concern. "Even if we accept that these analysis methods reveal a genuine threat, implementing them would require us to fundamentally alter our approach to galactic science. The philosophical implications are staggering. The survival implications are more staggering," Elena countered. "In 12 months, the galactic core will begin experiencing cascade failures that will propagate outward at near light speed. No species will have time to evacuate. No technology in the galactic arsenal can stop or contain a quantum field collapse of this magnitude." Chancellor Morthak's crystalline form pulsed with patterns Elena had learned indicated deep contemplation. "Dr. Vasquez, your analysis suggests that preventing this catastrophe would require implementing theoretical technologies that the Council classified as too dangerous for development. Are you proposing that we resurrect the exact innovations that led to your species' quarantine?" Elena took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would determine not only her fate but potentially the fate of both humanity and the galaxy itself. "I'm proposing that we develop new applications based on human theoretical frameworks, but with proper safety protocols and galactic oversight. The disaster my grandmother's colleague caused happened because he implemented revolutionary technology without adequate testing or safeguards. You're asking us to trust human innovation after it nearly destroyed an facility," observed a representative from the Syrian Federation. "I'm asking you to learn from human mistakes while utilizing human capabilities," Elena clarified. Dr. Webb's cascade amplification theory was sound, but he implemented it recklessly. With proper development protocols and galactic scientific cooperation, the same principles could be used to stabilize the quantum fields around the galactic core instead of disrupting Academy power systems. Professor Vexhai, who had been granted permission to address the Council, stepped forward. "I have spent 2 centuries studying human threat patterns, and I can confirm that Dr. Vasquez's assessment is consistent with our understanding of human capabilities. They possess an intuitive grasp of complex systems that our methodologies struggle to replicate. But they also possess a dangerous tendency toward reckless innovation," Vexhai continued. "Any cooperation would require unprecedented oversight and control measures." Elena saw her opening, "Which is exactly what I'm proposing. Controlled collaboration, not unrestricted access. Specific human expertise applied to specific problems under galactic supervision. We could establish joint research facilities where human theoretical frameworks are developed and tested by galactic scientists before implementation. The debate continued for hours, with representatives arguing the merits and dangers of Elena's proposal. Some species advocated for immediate human involvement, desperate to address the approaching crisis. Others insisted that the risks of human collaboration outweighed even the threat of galactic destruction. Finally, Chancellor Morthak called for order. The Council faces a choice that will define the future of galactic civilization. We can maintain our security protocols and face potential annihilation using conventional methods, or we can risk controlled cooperation with humanity to address this unprecedented threat. Elena watched as voting patterns began to emerge among the assembled representatives. The debate was closer than she had expected, with roughly equal numbers supporting cooperation and continued containment. "There is a third option," Elena said, her voice cutting through the deliberations. "Allow me to return to Earth with the data about the approaching crisis. Humanity can work on solutions independently, and if we develop viable approaches, we can transmit them to the galaxy without requiring direct cooperation. And if human solutions prove dangerous or destructive," asked the Vegan representative, "then you implement conventional countermeasures and maintain the quarantine," Elena replied. "But if we develop solutions that could save the galaxy, you'll have options you wouldn't have otherwise." Chancellor Morthak's crystalline form shifted through spectrum patterns Elena couldn't interpret. "You would willingly return to quarantine, knowing that you might never have another opportunity to leave your home system?" "My mission was never about personal freedom," Elena said firmly. "It was about proving that humanity deserves a place in galactic civilization. If that place is as problem solvers working from isolation, it's still better than being forgotten prisoners." The final vote was remarkably close, but Elena's proposal for independent human research ultimately prevailed. The galaxy would provide Earth with complete data about the approaching crisis, along with specifications for the technologies that might address it. Human scientists would have 18 months to develop solutions, with progress reports transmitted through quantum communication arrays. As Elena prepared for her return to Earth, Professor Vexhai approached her containment cell. "Your infiltration was remarkable," he admitted. "Our security protocols were completely inadequate against human adaptive capabilities." "They were designed to stop conventional infiltration methods," Elena replied. "Humans excel at finding unconventional approaches to difficult problems." "Which is precisely why your species represents such a significant threat," Vexhai observed, "and why you may be our only hope for survival." Elena was transported back to Earth aboard an automated vessel, carrying with her the complete database of galactic scientific knowledge related to the core instability crisis. As her ship approached the Sol system, she could see the quarantine barriers that had contained humanity for 2 centuries, now temporarily open to allow her passage home. But Elena knew that this was only the beginning. Humanity now had 18 months to prove that their innovative capabilities could be trusted on a galactic scale. If they succeeded, it might open the door to true cooperation and eventual integration into galactic civilization. If they failed, both humanity and the galaxy would face annihilation. As Earth grew larger in her viewport, Elena smiled for the first time in months. Her people had always excelled when facing impossible challenges. Now they had the ultimate test: save the galaxy that had imprisoned them, using the very abilities that had made them prisoners in the first place. The true measure of humanity's worth was about to begin, and Elena had complete faith that her species would once again prove that there was no limit to what humans could achieve when the stakes were high enough. The galaxy had spent 2 centuries fearing human potential. Soon they would learn to be grateful for it instead.